Hello, grade 12 students. In this video, we're going to talk about chapter 13, regulation of glycemia. So let's start first with document 1, glycemia, a biological constant, on page 256. Let's start first with glycemia, a biological constant of document 1. All of you know that glucose is an energetic source highly and permanently used by cells. So glucose is a source of energy. However, the amount of glucose provided through nutrition is discontinuous. Therefore, it's absolutely important to maintain a dynamic equilibrium between nutritional sources and the energy expenditure. So how do we measure the blood glucose concentration? How do we identify the regulation of glycemia, which is the sugar level inside the body? So rapid measurements of glucose concentration. In document A, we have first the Fehling test. Fehling test, it's the precred precipitate C2O indicates the presence of glucose. So using the Fehling test, whenever we have precred precipitate, means that this indicates the presence of glucose. Document B, we have the paper strip test. This paper strip test, it allows to measure the glucose concentration in fresh blood immediately. The colors corresponds to the increase in glucose and protein concentration. While document C is an apparatus used in the rapid measurement of blood glucose concentration. 2. Paragraph 2, variation in glycemia. Glycemia, you have to know it, definition, or the blood glucose concentration. So glycemia is the blood glucose concentration. The concentration of glucose in blood is subject to normal physiological fluctuations. The average value of glycemia is 0.8 gram per liter, which is 4.4 millimole per liter, but it decreases during intense muscular work and fasting. This is called hypoglycemia. So first, let's talk about hypo and hyper. Hypo means that the decrease in the level of glycemia, decrease in the concentration of glucose in blood, is called hypoglycemia. While on the other hand, the glucose level rises and exceeds 1.2 gram per liter after a meal rich in carbohydrates. This, what do we call it? Hyperglycemia. So you have to differentiate between hypoglycemia and hyper. Hypo, the decrease in the glucose concentration in blood, or the decrease in the glycemia. This occurs during the muscular workout and during fasting, while we have hyperglycemia mainly occurs after consuming a meal rich in carbohydrates. In addition, abnormal and serious variations in glycemia may be detected when suffering from functional troubles in some organs, such as the pancreas, the liver, the medulla oblongata, and some endocrine glands. For example, in the case of pancreatic disorder, we notice hyperglycemia that may reach 6 gram per liter, which is the average should be 0.8. In this case, the person suffers from diabetes mellitus. Identifying the regulation of glycemia. So this graph identifying the level of glycemia. So document D and E present experimental results obtained by measuring the glucose concentration in blood of the healthy person. So document D showing the graph illustrating the result of the provoked hyperglycemia test. So before the ingestion of glucose, the value of the glycemia was about 1 gram per liter, as you see here. So at the time of the section, there is a rapid increase. We have rapid increase in the glycemia level to reach approximately 1.8 to 1.7 gram per liter. 2 hours, the glycemia becomes almost normal again at the level which is 1. So here we have mechanism that brings glucose back to the normal level, even though we ingest a glucose solution. So here we can deduce that glycemia is a biological constant. So here, how does glycemia vary during the experiment carried out in document D? What do you deduce? So here we deduce, this indicates that the body is provided with a special mechanism that brings glucose back to the normal level, and therefore we can deduce that glycemia is a biological constant. Part 2, talking about based on the information of document E, indicate the effect of long fast on blood glucose concentration. What conclusion can you draw? There, the orally provoked hyperglycemia task consists in giving a fasting healthy person determined amount of glucose dissolved in water, then the evolution of glycemia in his blood to be observed during the following 4 hours. This document E, showing the result obtained when measuring glucose concentration in the blood of a person on a long fast. So 10 hours after a meal, the level of glucose was about 4.6, 4.7 millimole per liter. Then it decreased to about 3.2 to 3.3 gram per liter. And then after about a 30-day fast, it decreased about to 3 to 3.1. So glycemia is maintained around the normal value. After the long period of fast, it varies between 4.7 here and 3.2 here. So this indicates that the body, they have certain reserves. They have a reserve for glucose to support the decrease in the level of glucose. So part 3, based on your previous answers, justify the following statement. Glycemia is a physiological constancy. Physiological constancy, since when we have a high level of glucose, here in the case of hyperglycemia in document D, or in the case of hypo, the decrease of level hypoglycemia, and document E, the concentration of blood glucose, the glycemia fluctuates around almost a constant average. So glycemia is said to be a physiological constant or a biological constant. Part B, what can you conclude? We can conclude that the body should be provided with a special mechanism that regulates the level of glucose in blood in both cases, in the case of hyper or in hypoglycemia. So let's move to probing the documents, to the answers, but we already solved them. Let's start first. Probing the documents. Number 1, so before glucose ingestion, the value of glycemia was 1 gram per liter. At time of glucose ingestion, there is a rapid increase. There is a fast increase in glycemia to reach about 1.8 gram per liter. 2 hours later, glycemia goes back to the normal again, which is 1 gram per liter. So this means that the body is provided with a regulating mechanism that brings glucose level in the blood, the glycemia level, you can say, back to its normal whenever any aberration occurs. So therefore, glycemia is said to be a biological constant. Part 2, talking about in the case of hypoglycemia, glycemia is maintained around the normal value after the long period of fasting. It varies between 4.7 and 3.2 millimole per liter. So this means that the body organ should have special reserves of glucose to support the body by doses of stored glucose during the fasting period. Part 3, they're talking about hyper and hypo. Hyper, high level. Hypo, low level of glycemia. So in the case of provoked hyperglycemia, document D, and hypoglycemia, document E, blood glucose concentration or the glycemia fluctuates around almost a constant average, 0.8 to 1 gram per liter. Therefore, the glycemia is said to be a physiological constant or a biological constant. So here we can conclude that the body should be provided by a special mechanism that regulates the blood glucose concentration, the glycemia, in both cases, hyper, high level of glycemia, or hypo, which is low level of glycemia. Let's now move to document 2, the liver, an effector organ in the regulation of glycemia. So liver, an effector organ and the regulation of glycemia. The liver stores the excess of glucose and releases it in the case of deficiency. How can we experimentally prove the role of the liver maintaining the glycemic constancy? So let's start with this. Experimental studies. An animal can survive only a few hours after hepatectomy. So hepatectomy is the ablation of the liver. Everything hepatic is related to the liver. So hepatectomy, like the case of ovarectomy, the first chapters. So ovarectomy is the removal or the ablation of the ovaries. Here hepatectomy is the ablation of the liver. During this period, we notice a gradual fall in the glycemia until it reaches certain values that provoke convulsions, coma, and finally will reach to death. So, before the ablation of the liver, here we have the glycemia level was the normal one. It was 1 gram per liter. After liver ablation, after the removal of the liver, glycemia start to decrease. And this shows that in the absence of the liver, after the removal of the liver or after the ablation of the liver, you can say we have hypoglycemia. The level of glycemia decreases. So here we can deduce that the liver is an important organ that produces glucose and maintains the constant level of glycemia. What are the troubles? Troubles obtained that after the removal of the liver result from the hypoglycemia case. It reach about approximately 0.4. Maybe they can be coma, may result from deficiency of glucose at the cerebral level. Let's move to this experiment, liver washing, a historical experiment that reveals the glycogenic function of the liver. The famous experiment of the liver washing was carried also by Claude Bernard in 1855. He describes it as follows. I choose a steady and healthy adult dog. So I chose a healthy adult dog and fed it for several days on meat. Then 7 hours after a copious meal of tripe, I sacrificed it. Immediately, I removed its liver and continuously washed it through the portal vein. Then, what will happen? I kept this liver in continuous wash for 40 minutes. I had noticed that at the beginning of the experiment, that the red water spurting from the hepatic veins was sweet. At the end, I noticed that the colorless water coming out of the veins included no traces of sugar. So, I kept the liver in a vase at room temperature. When I came back 24 hours later, I noticed that the liver, which the day before contained no sugar at all, then filled with plenty of sugar. Claude Bernard concluded that this experiment proved that in an active liver, a fresh liver in its physiological state, we identify the presence of two substances. The sugar carried away while washing, and which is very soluble in water. Another substance that is slightly soluble in water. When the liver is kept at ambient temperature, the substance is gradually transformed into sugar. So they call this substance glycogen. So Claude Bernard studied this substance as a glycogen. So after washing the hepatic artery, moving to the liver, and moving from the subhepatic vein, we have sweet water. Then after washing it again, we have water. After 24 hours, washing it with water and moving through the hepatic vein again, it gives sweet water. So this is a document C scheme illustrating the circulation of blood inside the liver through the hepatic vein, hepatic artery, and so on. So, functions of the liver. Glucose is stored in the liver in form of glycogen. So you have to know this. Glucose is stored in the liver in the form of glycogen. Glycogen is a polymer of glucose. Okay? It results from the combination of thousands of glucose molecules and loss of water. The series of reactions that allow the transformation of simple glucose molecules into complex glycogen is called glycogenesis. So every time I talk about genesis, is the formation of. So glycogenesis is the formation of the glycogen after the glucose are transformed. Simple glucose molecules are transformed into complex molecules of glycogen in a process called glycogenesis. The inverse, the hydrolysis of glycogen. Lysis, it's the lysis of, or the hydrolysis. The hydrolysis of glycogen is called glycogenolysis. So glycogenolysis is the lysis of glucose. These reactions require the action of some enzymes, including of the liver cells, or they are called hepatocytes. When glycogen is depleted, the liver produces glucose from substrates not rich in carbohydrates like amino acids, glycerol, fatty acids, resulting from the hydrolysis of muscular and fatty tissues in reserve. This is called neoglycogenesis. So neoglycogenesis, that's the name of the reaction. You have to know this: glycogenolysis, glycogenesis, and neoglycogenesis. The constancy of glycemia thus maintained. When the liver is saturated with the glycogen, the excess of glucose is stored in the muscle in the form of glycogen and in the adipose tissue in the form of lipids. Unlike muscles, the liver is the sole organ able to release glucose in blood in order to correct a fall in glycemia. In fact, the hepatic cell contains exclusively an enzyme called glucose 6-phosphatase. Pay attention to this enzyme. Glucose 6-phosphatase that can remove the phosphate groups from the glucose resulting from the hydrolysis of glycogen. This glucose deprived of phosphate is the only form of glucose capable of passing through all the cell membrane. So this document A showing the liver and effector organ and the regulation of glycemia. We're going to summarize this figure later on in the coming slide. Also document D showing a section of liver revealing granules of glycogen colored in reddish brown due to iodized water. And also document F showing the enzymatic hydrolysis of glycogen contained in the hepatic cell. Glycogen using the enzyme glucose 1-phosphate, enzyme 2 glucose 6-phosphate, and using the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase, it comes to glucose valve of phosphate-free glucose. So number 1, referring to the results of the hepatectomy in experiment. Document A. What can you deduce concerning the role of the liver? We said that the liver is an organ that produces glucose and maintains a constant glycemia level. What is the cause of the troubles obtained? Low glucose hypoglycemia that cause coma may result from the deficiency of glucose at the level of the cerebrum. Number 2, they said based on the information provided in document B and the anatomical data presented in document C, schematize the different steps. We're going to schematize them. Part B, write a sentence in which you explain the glycogenic function of the liver. We said that the liver can produce glucose from glycogen kept in reserve in the hepatic tissues in case of blood glucose deficiency. 3, draw out from paragraph 2 the reaction that take place in the liver. What are the components? We have glycogenesis. We said the production of glycogen from glucose in the liver. Glycogenolysis, it's the lysis or the hydrolysis of glycogen, and it's reserved to produce glucose under the action of the enzyme which is called glucose 6-phosphatase enzyme in the liver. We have neoglycogenesis, production of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. Part 4, let's move to why is neoglycogenesis considered as a rescue. Neoglycogenesis as a rescue means since in the case of depletion of hepatic glycogen we don't have, the liver uses another means to produce glucose. It uses amino acids, maybe fatty acid and glycerol that result from the hydrolysis of reserves in the muscular and adipose tissues, proteins, lipids respectively. Okay, moving to part 5, we're going to draw the. So here, let's move to some notes. In the process of glycogenesis, glycogen will give glucose, and the process of glycogenesis will release glycogen in liver and muscles, while glucose at the process of lipogenesis. What do I mean? Lipogenesis, formation of lipids, will occur. Both of them will occur during hyperglycemia, meaning that we have high level of sugar. This is the cause whenever you become fat, you're coming to the source by the process of lipogenesis. While in the case of hypoglycemia, glycogen by the process of glycogenolysis we need glucose. So glycogenolysis will give glucose secreted in blood, or amino acids and fatty acid and glycerol will give glucose secreted in the blood by the process of neoglycogenesis. The muscle glycogen by the process of glycogenolysis will give glucose not secreted into the blood. You have to study these reactions and where is the site of these reactions. Okay. Role of the liver. So before the ablation of the liver, the glycemia level was 1 gram per liter. After liver ablation, the glycemia started to decrease. This showed that the absence of liver induces hypoglycemia. So therefore, we can deduce that the liver is an organ that produces glucose and maintains a constant glycemia. Troubles observed after the removal of the liver result from hypoglycemia that reach about 0.4 gram per liter, might result in deficiency in glucose at the cerebral level. Part 2, this is schematic diagram. Washing water path through the hepatic artery to the liver and path through the hepatic vein to go out with the sweet water. While second experiment, taking step, water, hepatic artery path through the liver, subhepatic vein, and water. We have this, and the last step, water, we have a hepatic artery. It passes through the liver 24 hours later and then through the subhepatic vein, and we have sweet water. Liver can produce glucose from glycogen kept in reserve in the hepatic tissues. In the case of blood glucose deficiency, part 3 talking about the reactions. So we have three types of reaction. Glycogenesis. Genesis, as I said, genesis is the production of. So glycogenesis, production of glycogen from the excess of blood glucose and liver. Glycogenolysis, hydrolysis of glycogen in its reserves to produce glucose under the action of the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase in the liver. Neoglucogenesis, production of glucose from non-carbohydrate. Neoglucogenesis is considered as a rescue. It means since in the case of depletion of hepatic glycogen, we don't have glycogen, the liver uses another sources or another means to produce glucose. It uses fatty acid, glycerol, amino acids that result from the hydrolysis in the reserve of muscular and adipose amino acids from proteins and fatty acid, glycerol from lipids respectively. This table is showing the different contributions of liver, muscles, and adipose tissues to glycemia regulation. The liver stores the glucose in the form of glycogen, produces glucose from amino acids and glycerol, and releases it in the blood. Releases glucose through the hydrolysis of glycogen due to an enzyme called glucose 6-phosphatase. Muscles stores glucose in the form of glycogen, provide the amino acid that the liver transformed into glucose, cannot release glucose directly in the blood due to the lack of the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase. And adipose stores glucose in the form of lipids, provide the glycerol that the liver transformed into glucose, cannot release glucose directly into blood due to the lack of the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase. So this is the comparison between the different contribution of the liver, the muscles, and adipose tissues for glycemic regulation. Okay. So now let's move to document 3, the pancreas and glycemia. Following clinical observations of patients suffering from hyperglycemia, physiologists carried out several experiments on animals to determine the causes of this disorder. So they discovered an essential role of the pancreas. What are the bases of these experiments? What are the anatomical structures that allow the pancreas to fulfill its role? Let's start with paragraph 1, clinical observations, the diabetes mellitus. Diabetes is a disorder in metabolism represented in the form of permanent hyperglycemia, meaning that high level of sugar inside the blood, greater than 1.2 gram per liter. There are several forms of diabetes. The most serious one is the juvenile diabetes because it attacks adolescents and young adults who lose weight. This disease is characterized by hyperglycemia greater than 1. This is the first one, juvenile diabetes, affecting the adolescents and young adults, and it's greater than 2.2 gram per liter. A polyuria and a glucosuria, an elimination of excessive quantity of urine rich in glucose. Normally, the urine doesn't contain glucose, but the later appears as soon as glycemia rises above a threshold value around 1.8 gram per liter. This results in the dehydration of the body as well and intense thirst because glucose carries water away with it. Therefore, the patient substitutes glucose with the lipid reserves and suffers from emaciation. So the other form of diabetes is the adult onset diabetes or maturity onset diabetes. So this one, the other adult onset one or the maturity onset diabetes, that often affects obese persons and individuals consuming a lot of lipids and carbohydrates. Document A, we have the detection of diabetes mellitus through the glucose tolerance test or orally provoked hyperglycemia. Here we have the healthy and the diabetic. So at the moment of the injection of glucose, the level of glucose in the diabetic person, this one is pink, and the healthy, the one in red. The level of glucose in the diabetic person, it was about 1.2 to 1.3 gram per liter, while it was about 0.8 to 0.9 gram per liter in the healthy individual. After about 30 minutes, about half an hour here, the individuals, the diabetic one or the healthy one, present a hyperglycemia. And the healthy person, we notice that we have a mild hyperglycemia, which is about 1.5 gram per liter, while in the diabetic it increases to 2 to 2.1 gram per liter. Then hyperglycemia is returning back to the normal after about 2 hours. So it returns back to its normal value after 2 hours in the healthy person. So it goes back to the normal values after 2 hours in the healthy person, while it needs about 3 hours in the diabetic person. It returns to the start point, and the provoked hyperglycemia to return back to the start point is slower in diabetic. It needs 3 hours, while in the normal it needs about 2 hours here. Okay, so the mechanism of glycemia in the diabetic person, as we conclude here, is slower and it's less effective than the healthy individual. So it's always higher in the individual that is affected by diabetes. Experimental studies, paragraph 2. Experimental A, the ablation of the entire pancreas, pancreectomy. So we remove the pancreas, we remove it at all. So if a dog provokes troubles in digestion and symptoms of diabetes mellitus that develops and finally induces the animal's death in document B. So experiment B, in a dog that was subject to pancreectomy and suffering from diabetes, we connect the pancreas of a dog to others. Let's read. First step, before the pancreatic ablation, pancreectomy, the level of glycemia, it was about 1 gram per liter. After the ablation and the removal of the pancreas at time equal to hours, there is the recording of the digestive trouble and hyperglycemia, increase in glycemia to reach about 4 gram per liter at time equal approximately 8 hours, accompanied by glycosuria, this one at t equal 4 hours. These results indicate that pancreas has 2 roles. One of them is related to digestion, and the other one is related to the glycemia role. It has a role in glycemia, so it has a hypoglycemic role. It decreases the level of glycemia and it prevents the glycosuria, which is symptom of diabetes here. Okay. Moving to the bloodstream here. In the bloodstream, this continue of the experiment B. At the level of the neck, here in experiment B, at the level of the neck, we have symptoms of diabetes will disappear, whereas digestive troubles, they present. A few hours later, we remove the pancreas and we measure out the blood glucose concentration at different time intervals and document D. This document D is showing the measurements of glycemia in a dog whose pancreas is connected to the neck, then it's disconnected. So we remove the pancreas and follow this by grafting the pancreas at the level of the neck through the bloodstream. It corrects the symptoms of diabetes. Glycemia level drops back to the normal level. It drops back to the normal level, but it drops back to about 4 gram to about 1 gram per liter after the connection. And this will show that the pancreas, it acts on glycemia, but it doesn't correct the problems in digestion. So it works at the level of glycemia through blood, but it doesn't work at digestive role. When pancreas is connected to blood, glycemia falls back to the average value, which is 1 gram per liter. When it's disconnected, the level of glycemia increases again, as shown in document D. So this indicates that pancreas acts on the glycemia regulation. It has a hypoglycemic role only through blood. Okay? It's only through blood. Let's move now to experiment C. Following the inactivation of their digestive enzymes. So in experiment C, as I said, following the inactivation of their digestive enzymes, so these enzymes are inactivated, and then we inject the pancreatic extracts in animals that were subject to pancreectomy. So here we inject pancreatic extracts whose enzymes are inactivated previously to a dog that is diabetic and with no pancreas. We have elimination of the symptoms of diabetes. So we eliminate the symptoms of diabetes only as long as the injection lasts. So this means that pancreas acts on glycemia regulation via blood and through the secretion of a specific substance. It's not an enzyme. Here we call it a hormone. So here, this substance, hormone, as I said, will eliminate the symptoms of diabetes. In experiment D, the selective destruction of some pancreatic structures, islets of Langerhans, provokes only the disappearance of diabetes. What does this mean? Only the appearance of diabetes. So here, selective destruction of some pancreatic structures. So destruction of islets of Langerhans provokes only the appearance of diabetes. This means that these structures, islet of Langerhans in the pancreas, they are responsible for the decrease of the level of glycemia. It's trivial. So the pancreas produces through the islets of Langerhans hormones that are released into blood, and they can cause a decrease in the level of sugar. This is as a conclusion here. So here I'm solving part 2. If you notice here, what can you deduce from experiments presented in paragraph 2? So we analyze and we interpret all these experiments and draw out a conclusion that the pancreas has 2 roles. It has a hypoglycemic role, endured by the secretion of hormone directly into the blood, and has a role in digestive role. Okay, let's move now to the pancreas 2 functional sets. Pancreas is an organ weighing about 60 to 100 grams and located under the stomach. It's characterized by a bulging head that rests against the duodenum. The microscopic observation of excretion of the pancreas reveals the mixed character of this gland, the exocrine pancreas and the endocrine one. The exocrine pancreas is constituted of several acini whose granulated cells, these are the acinas, okay, acini, this one, this whose granulated cells produce the pancreatic juice that contains digestive enzymes. This juice is discharged in the digestive tract through special excretory ducts. The endocrine pancreas clusters of cells called islets of Langerhans. These islets of Langerhans, which was first described by 1869 by Paul Langerhans, that's why it's called islets of Langerhans. The cells of these islets include no excretory ducts and secretes 2 hormones, insulin and glucagon, that are discharged in the blood. So pancreas is a mixed gland since it contains 2 functional sets. Acini cells, exocrine parts that secrete pancreatic juice into the digestive tract, and islets of Langerhans, endocrine part that releases hormones that are insulin and glucagon to regulate the level of glycemia. So first, number one, at the moment of ingestion of glucose, the level of glucose in a diabetic person was 1.2 gram per liter, which is higher than that of the healthy person, which was 0.8 gram per liter. Half an hour after glucose ingestion, both individuals, they present a different hyperglycemia. In the healthy person, we notice a mild hyperglycemia, while in the diabetic, we have it's higher than the normal. It's about 2.1 gram per liter. Hyperglycemia is corrected, returns back to the normal value or normal level after 2 hours in the healthy, yet it goes back to the normal after 3 hours in a diabetic. So this shows that in a diabetic person, glycemia is higher level than the normal. As well, the return to the start after provoked hyperglycemia is slower in the diabetic individual. So here we can conclude that the regulatory mechanism of glycemia in a diabetic person is slower and less effective than that in the healthy person. Moreover, glycemia is always higher in diabetic person. Moving to the experiments on document 2. So in paragraph 2, So experiment A, before pancreatectomy, the level of glycemia was 1 gram per liter. So after the ablation of the pancreas at t equal 2 hours, there is the recording of digestive troubles and hyperglycemia, increase in glycemia to reach about 4 gram per liter at time equal 8 hours, accompanied by glycosuria at t equal 4 hours as shown in document B. So these results indicate that the pancreas has double role, digestive role and a hypoglycemic role, lowers glycemia and prevents glycosuria as symptoms of diabetes. In experiment B, the ablation of the pancreas followed by grafting of the pancreas at the level of the neck through the bloodstream correct the symptoms of diabetes. Glycemia drops from about 4 gram before connecting to fluctuate around 1 gram per liter after the connection, but the digestive troubles, they persist. They show that the pancreas through the blood acts only on glycemia. It has no digestive role through blood. When pancreas is connected to blood, glycemia falls back to the average value. When it's disconnected again, glycemia rises again as shown in document D. So this means that pancreas acts on regulation of glycemia. It has a hypoglycemic role. You have to study this through blood and not digestive troubles. Experiment C, the injection of pancreatic extract whose enzymes are previously inactivated to a diabetic dog without a pancreas undergo ablation corrects only the symptoms of diabetes. This indicates that the pancreas acts on glycemic regulation via blood and through secretion of a substance. It's not an enzyme into the blood. So in the presence of this substance, which is a hormone in the blood, the symptoms of diabetes disappear. While in experiment D, the selective destruction of pancreatic islets of Langerhans provokes only the appearance of diabetes. This indicates that these particular structures, islet of Langerhans, they are responsible for the decrease of glycemia. So therefore, the pancreas produces through the islets of Langerhans substances or hormones that are released into the blood and can cause a decrease of glycemia. So the pancreas has two roles: digestive role, exocrine function, and hypoglycemic role, ensured by the secretion of substances, hormones directly into the blood, insulin and glucagon. So the pancreas is a mixed gland because it's composed of two functional cells: acidic cells, exocrine part that secretes pancreatic juice released into digestive tract, islet of Langerhans, endocrine part that releases hormones into blood to regulate the level of glycemia. So now let's start with document 4, hypoglycemic system, on page 260. So hypoglycemic system. Factors that regulate glycemia such as the liver or organs capable of storing glucose and thus inducing hypoglycemia. Their activity is governed by a humoral factor, which is insulin, a hormone secreted by islets of Langerhans. What triggers insulin secretion? Where And how does it function? Insulin secretion. Insulin is a protein consisting of 51 amino acids that are divided into two chains. We have two chains, alpha chain and beta, connected to each other by disulfide bridges. As shown in document A, we have two chains and they are connected by disulfide bridges. During food ingestion, which rises the glucose concentration in the artery irrigating the pancreas, the rise of glycemia triggers insulin secretion by the beta cells as shown here. So whenever you have ingestion of 50 grams of glucose, so the level of glycemia, it rises above 1.2 gram per liter, and that of insulin in parallel, it increases to work in the increase of glycemia. So this one is showing the measurements of glucose, glycemia meaning that, and insulin concentration in blood of an individual who has ingested 50 grams. So after the ingestion of glucose, the level of glycemia increases above 1.2 gram per liter, and that of the insulin level increases too. Some of them, they ask why insulin is not taken orally, is not administered orally. It's not administered orally because it's maybe digested by specific proteases. So that's why it should be administered through blood and not orally. Okay, so let's move now to paragraph 2, role of insulin. Role of insulin. Several experiments have been carried out to show the role of insulin. Experiment A, we measure out the glycemia level in the hepatic artery and the subhepatic veins of a dog that has received an injection of insulin for 20 minutes before eating anything. So the dog didn't digest or didn't ingest any food before and after the injection. So here, as you see here, this is the insulin injection. There's a level of glucose, variation of glycemia in the arterial blood arriving to the liver, B, this is arriving to the liver, and venous blood coming out from the liver in A. So here, the liver releases more glucose than it receives. Since glycemia in the venous blood was 0.9 gram per liter, greater than that, and the arterial blood, which is about 0.85. So in the venous, it was higher, and it was 0.9 greater than in the arterial, which is B, which is about 0.85. Okay, the amount of glucose released after the injection is less than that before the injection of insulin. So still, the level of glycemia is higher in the venous, than in the arterial blood. So this means that the insulin acts on the hepatic cells to increase the storage of glucose. So they work to store glucose. Experiment B, we measure the glycogen concentration in the liver of a dog before and after pancreatectomy, and then after the insulin injection. In document D, we're going to move to this. And the experiment C, they have a muscle is placed in a medium containing insulin, then a medium void from insulin, 10 minutes. We measure in each case the amount of glucose absorbed by the muscle and the amount of glycogen present in the muscle. So what document D? Document D, before the pancreatectomy, the hepatic glycogen level was 2.5 gram per 100 gram of liver. After the pancreatectomy or the ablation of pancreas leads to the decrease in the hepatic glycogen level, where it reached the minimum value, which is about less than, it's about 0.7 or 0.8 gram in 100 gram of liver. While the insulin level, or after insulin injection, raises this. After the insulin injection, after we inject insulin here, we have a raise in this level to go back to its normal, which is about 2.5 gram per 100 gram. So this shows that insulin stimulates or provokes or helps in the synthesis of the hepatic glycogen and its storage in the liver. What do you call this process? Do you remember this? This formation of glycogen is called glycogenesis. While in document A, the amount of glucose absorbed by the muscle and that of glycogen present in the muscle are higher than the presence of insulin. They are 1.43 and they are 2.4, while where they are less than here, they are less than that with insulin. They're 1.88 and 2.85. So this shows that insulin works on the muscle to increase their capacity or their level to absorb glucose and store them in the form of muscular glycogen. So we can deduce here that insulin is a hypoglycemic hormone. It decreases the level of glycemia by working on the muscular cells and on the hepatic cells to enhance the storage of glucose in the form of glycogen. So here with insulin, the level of absorbed glucose is 1.88, while without it was 1.43. The muscular glycogen 2.85 milligram per gram of muscle, which is 2.45 without insulin. So insulin is a hypoglycemic hormone. Mode of action of hormones. Despite their presence in the entire body, hormones affect only certain target cells that are electively sensitive to hormonal action. This specific response is ensured by the presence of membranous sites, sometimes intracellular. They are called receptors, specialized in the fixation of the hormone. The response of target cells to hormonal messages required a temporary link between hormones and the receptors. The fixation of the hormone on the receptor triggers a physiological response that corresponds to the activation or in the inhibition. So here, the synthesis and the release of the hormone of the beta cells of the pancreas. So whenever they release insulin by the process of exocytosis, when beta cells they release insulin into the blood, the insulin hormone fixes on the receptors here, on its receptors. Thus, it provokes the activation of the second messenger. So we have the activation of the second messenger that is responsible for increasing in the permeability for glucose, and it's also responsible for the storage of glucose in the form of glycogen. So this is the mode of action of insulin. So insulin, when they are released by the beta cells, so when beta cells release insulin into the blood, the insulin hormone fixes on its receptors on the hepatic cell membrane. Thus, it provokes the activation of the second messenger, you have to know this, and increase the permeability for glucose. It's also responsible for the storage of the glucose in the form of glycogen. Let's move to the exercises. Insulin release is triggered by the rise of glycemia level above 1.2 gram in blood. Document B shows the parallel evolution in insulin level as a function of glycemia. As glycemia increases, the insulin will increase as well. Insulin, as I said, it's a protein that would, once injected orally, be digested by digestive proteases. That's why it should not be administered orally. Experiment A, the dog didn't ingest any food before and after injection of insulin. The liver releases more glucose than it receives. Glycemia in venous, which was 0.9 gram per liter, was higher than in the arterial blood, which is about 0.85 gram per liter. So the amount of glucose released after the injection is less than that before the injection. So the amount of glucose released after the injection is less than that before the injection of insulin, but still the glycemia level is higher in the venous blood than the arterial. So this means that the glucose acts on the hepatic cell to increase the glucose storage. Before pancreectomy, hepatic glycogen was 2.5 gram per 100 gram of liver. The ablation of the pancreas leads to a decrease in the hepatic glycogen level until it reaches a minimal value less than 1 gram per 100 gram of liver. While on the other hand, insulin injection raises this level back to 2.5, which is the normal. So this shows that insulin through the blood stimulates the synthesis of hepatic glycogen and its storage in the liver by the reaction is called glycogenesis. Experiment C. the amount of glucose absorbed by the muscle and that of glycogen present on the muscle are higher in the presence of insulin, 1.88 milligram per gram of muscle and 2.85 milligram per gram of muscle respectively. They are higher than that in the absence of insulin, as we said, 1.43 milligram per gram of muscle and 2.45 milligram of muscle respectively. So this shows that insulin acts on muscle cells to increase their absorption of glucose and its storage in the form of muscular glycogen. So therefore, insulin is a hypoglycemic hormone that acts on hepatic and muscular cells to enhance the storage of glucose in the form of glycogen. Part 5, they are asking about the mode of action of insulin on the hepatic cell. So this one you have to study it, you have to know it. When beta cells, they are releasing insulin into the blood, the insulin hormone fixes on its receptors on the hepatic cell membrane. Thus, it provokes the activation of a second messenger. So you have activation of second messenger. First, whenever the beta cells are releasing insulin into the blood, the insulin fixes on its receptors on the hepatic cell membrane. Activation of the second messenger that is responsible increasing the permeability of the cells to glucose, also storage in glucose in the form of glycogen. This is the mode of action of insulin on pancreatic cells. By this, we finish document 4 about the hypoglycemic system. Document 5, hyperglycemic system, on page 264. Hyperglycemic system. In addition to the hypoglycemic system, the regulation of glycemia requires a hyperglycemic system that consists of certain hormones. Which hormones constitute the hyperglycemic system? What triggers their secretion and how do they act? First paragraph, let's talk about glucagon, a major hyperglycemic factor. Glucagon is the polypeptide that consists of a chain made up of 29 amino acids. It's secreted by the alpha cells of the islets of the Langerhans. Experiments have been carried out to identify the role of glucagon that is interfering in the regulation of glycemia. Experiment A. In experiment A, when we orally administer pancreatic extracts to an animal, we notice a hyperglycemia, for insulin is dissipated by digestive enzymes. When we inject glucagon in the body of a healthy individual, it provokes hyperglycemia followed by glycosuria. So after the oral administration, of pancreatic extract, we have hyperglycemia is detected, while the injection of glucagon leads to hyperglycemia followed by glycosuria. This shows that insulin was digested. Digested means that this extract that contains a substance that is not digested by digestive enzymes. So this substance is called glucagon. Glucagon is a hyperglycemic hormone. In experiment B, we isolate the islet of Langerhans of a rat's pancreas and we place them in a medium where we provoke a variation in glucose concentration. We measure the levels of glucagon and insulin on a regular basis. So when glucose level rises from 0 to 5 gram per liter, we're talking about the glucose level. So whenever the glucose level increases from 0 to 5, insulin secretion increases from 0 to 4,000 nanogram per 20 minutes. Yet when a glucose level reaches 3 gram per liter, when it reaches about 3 gram per liter, the glucagon falls progressively from 20 nanogram per 20 minutes to reach about 0 and stabilizes at this concentration of glucose, which is 5 grams per liter. Here we're talking about glucose. This is glucose on this line, okay? In order to not be confused. This is glucose. So when a glucose level rises from 0 to 5, the insulin secretion increases from 0 to 4,000. And the level of glucagon, when it reaches a 3, the 0 to 3, the level of glucagon decreases from 20 nanogram per 20 minutes to reach approximately 0 and continues constant. And the concentration increases for 5 grams per liter. So this indicates that the secretion of insulin and glucagon correspond to each glucose level, and that of glucagon is a hypoglycemic hormone. It's secreted when level of glucose is less than 3 grams per liter, while insulin is secreted as glucose level increases. So you have to know this. After 3, glucagon is not function anymore. We don't have secretion of this hormone. This means that glucagon is a hypoglycemic hormone. Okay, so let's move to experiment C. We measure the levels of blood glucose and hepatic glycogen. So the level of glucose and hepatic glycogen concentration are better units before and after glucagon injection in a fasting dog. So after the glucagon injection, both levels of glycemia and glycogen, they work opposite to each other. After glucagon injection, the level of blood glucose concentration increases to about 1.7 to 1.8, while the glucose level rises from 0.5 to about 2. Let's say it's 2, and the glycogen, it falls down. This indicates that glucagon acts on the cells, at the hepatic cells, to promote the digestion of glycogen into glucose by the process called glycogenolysis. So therefore, we can say that glucagon is a hyperglycemic hormone. It's a hyper one that acts on hepatic cells to increase blood glucose level. Okay? So let's move now to the notes here found in the yellow box. So yellow box here, we have to know that glucagon also affects adipose cells by ensuring the release of fatty acids that may be used in neoglycogenesis. So glucagon is not the sole hyperglycemic hormone, so it's the hyperglycemic hormone. There are other hormones such as adrenaline, secreted by adrenal medulla, cortisol, secreted by the cortical medulla, growth hormone, secreted by pituitary gland, and thyroid hormone, secreted by the thyroid gland, as shown in document C. So in experiment A, I'm going to solve parts 1 and 2 together. So experiment A, after the oral administration of the pancreatic extracts, hyperglycemia is detected. Moreover, the injection of glucagon in the blood leads to hyperglycemia and glycoguria. They show that as insulin was digested, these extracts contain a substance that's not digested by digestive enzymes. The substance is called glucagon, and glucagon is a hyperglycemic hormone. Experiment B, when a glucose level rises from 0 to 5, insulin secretion increases from 0 to 4,000 nanogram per 20 minutes. Yet, when a glucose level reaches 3 gram per liter, glucagon falls progressively from 20 nanogram per 20 minutes to 0, and it starts to stabilize as the concentration of glucose reaches 5. This indicates that the well-determined secretion of insulin and glucagon correspond to each glucose level, and that glucagon, which is a hyperglycemic hormone, is secreted when glucose level is less than 3, while insulin is secreted as glucose level increases above 1 gram per liter. In experiment C, following glucagon injection, both levels of glycemia and glycogen develop inversely. Glucose level rises from 0.5 to 2 gram per liter, while glycogen level, it remains to fall. This indicates that glucagon acts on the hepatic cell to promote the hydrolysis of glucagon into glucose by reaction is called glycogenolysis. So therefore, Glucagon is a hyperglycemic hormone that acts on the hepatic cell to increase the blood glucose level. As you note, glucose 6-phosphorylase is the enzyme which causes glycogen to break into glucose 6-phosphate. Glucose 6-phosphatase, the enzyme which breaks down the phosphatic group of glucose 6-phosphate, where the result will be free glucose. There's the difference between glucose 6-phosphorylase and glucose 6-phosphatase. Glucose 6-phosphorylase is the enzyme which causes glycogen to break down into glucose 6-phosphate, and glucose 6-phosphatase, the enzyme which breaks the phosphate group of glucose 6-phosphate, where the result will be free glucose. Glucokinase, the enzyme that phosphorylates glucose into glycogen. So the action of hyperglycemic non-pancreatic hormones are complementary to the action of glucagon. They release the glucose kept in reserve and reduce its usage. So in the case of hypoglycemia, this is part 3, pancreas secrete glucagon. So in liver, glycogen by the process of glycogenolysis will become glucose. Amino acids, fatty acid glycerol by the process of the reaction neoglucogenesis will give glucose secreted in blood. The adipose tissue, lipids by the reaction lipolysis gives fatty acids and glycerol. Adrenal gland secretes adrenaline. The liver, what will happen? Glycogen becomes glucose in the reaction of glycogenolysis. Also, fatty acid and glycerol and amino acid, neoglucogenesis, they become glucose. We saw this in the previous chapters. So, adrenal cortex secretes cortisol, which causes decrease in glucose oxidation, meaning that decrease in the glucose usage by all the body cells. We have in adipose tissues, lipids by the process of lipolysis gives fatty acids and glycerol. Pituitary glands, they secrete growth hormone. In liver, glycogen by the process of glycogenolysis give glucose, fatty acid, glycerol, and amino acids. Neoglucogenesis give glucose. In muscle, decrease in glucose usage or glucose oxidation. Thyroid gland, it secretes thyroxine. It causes an increase in the absorption of glucose from the intestine into the blood. Let's move to the case of hyperglycemia. Pancreas secretes insulin. In the liver of muscle, glucose by the process of glycogenesis, they become glycogen. So glucose into glycogen. In the adipose tissue, glucose is absorbed and transformed to fatty acids and glycerol, which are stored in the form of lipids. Lipogenesis is provoked, and all body cells, oxidation rate or the glucose usage is increased. So person who suffer from non-insulin dependent diabetes, they have lack in the insulin receptors found in the hepatic cells. So the level of insulin is normal, and the problem is not in insulin. So administration of insulin is not a treatment. This is the first way to answer this question. Or you can say, in the case of juvenile diabetes, there is deficiency in insulin secretion. Target cells are normal and have insulin receptors. Consequently, the treatment by insulin injection is effective. In the case of maturity onset diabetes, this treatment is ineffective since the secretion is normal, while target cells, they have few or even no insulin receptors. As a note, if injection of insulin is not effective, although insulin receptors are normal, quantity and quantity wise, there might be a problem in the formation of the second messenger or in other pathways involved in the glycogenesis reaction. Let's move now to the last document, document 6, talking about the regulation of glycemia by feedback control, page 206. Regulation of glycemia by feedback control. The constancy of glycemia is ensured by a series of mechanisms that constitute a regulatory system. On which principle is this system based on? How is glycemia regulation ensured in the body? And formation of the hormonal cells. Glycemic stability depends on a state of equilibrium between the hypoglycemic system and the hyperglycemic system. This equilibrium should be adjusted according to the state of glycemia. Therefore, hormonal cells must be permanently provided with the necessary information about the fluctuation in a blood glucose concentration in order to correct them. The information is sent to the hormonal cells either through the blood or through the nervous system. In case of adrenaline cells, in both cases, the informative molecule is mainly glucose. So experimental analysis carried out on the isolated islets of Langerhans show that the insulin secretion increases rapidly when glucose concentration increases or exceeds its normal value. Moreover, the analysis proved that the rise of glycemia inhibits glucagon secretion, whereas the fall stimulates the secretion of glucagon. Moving to paragraph 2, autoregulation of the glycemia. So glycemia is regulated by the glycemic value itself. Normally, the regulation of glycemia is ensured by pancreatic hormones. Hence, insulin and glucagon cooperate in a closed negative feedback control or negative feedback circuit. In all corrective measures, the stimulus consists in either an increase or a decrease in the glucose concentration in blood that induces rise or fall in glycemia. This is the principle of negative feedback control. So blood glucose regulates the production of hyperglycemic or hypoglycemic hormones to restore it back to the normal level. This is called autoregulation. So hyperglycemia, whenever we have hyperglycemia, meaning that we have high level of glucose concentration in the blood, provokes the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans. So an increase in the level of glucose provokes or activates the beta cells of islets of Langerhans to secrete the insulin and inhibit the alpha cells from secretion of glucagon. So this will lead to the decrease in the glucose level, while in the glycemia. On the other hand, hypoglycemia, meaning that we have decrease in the level of sugar. So we have islets of Langerhans, so we have activation of beta cells, activation of alpha cells and inhibition of the beta cells. This will lead to the increase in the glycemia. In both cases, regulation is ensured by negative feedback. Okay, so here beta cells, they secrete the insulin, while here the alpha cells, they secrete the glucagon. Neurohormonal integration. So as you know here, before we start with neurohormonal integration, you have to know that the insulin and the glucagon, they are the two hormones, insulin and the glucagon. Their concentration depends on the glucose concentration in the blood. Okay, so neurohormonal integration. The nervous system also intervenes in the regulation of glycemia. Hence, any kind of stress or emotions, fear, anger can provoke a rise in glycemia. The hypothalamus contains cells that are glucose-sensitive to hypoglycemia and able to trigger to the nervous system the release of adrenaline epinephrine at the level of the adrenal medulla stress condition. The corrective effect consists in a hyperglycemia induced by glycogenolysis and in neoglucogenesis in the liver and lipolysis in the adipose tissues. Here we're going to solve only parts 1 and 2. Part 1 and 2 part explain why the regulation considered as autoregulation. Already we solved this. We're going not to illustrate it in the diagram. Part 2 specify the effect of the ingestion of carbohydrates on insulin and glucose concentration. We will solve this together. So for part 1, talking about the regulation, we said that blood glucose regulates the production of hypoglycemic and hyperglycemic hormones to restore the normal values of glucose. This is called autoregulation. Hyperglycemia provokes the beta cells of the islet of Langerhans that secretes insulin and inhibit the alpha cells that secretes glucagon, leading to the decrease of glycemia. While on the other hand, hypoglycemia stimulates the alpha cells and inhibit those of beta, leading to the increase in the level of glycemia. Both cases, regulation is ensured by negative feedback. So insulin and glucagon, they are the major hormones involved in the regulation of glycemia. Their concentration in blood depends on blood glucose level. A meal rich in carbohydrates provokes a rise in the blood glucose level, stimulating the beta cells the islet of Langerhans that secrete insulin to lower the glucose level. As well, high concentration of glucose in blood inhibit the secretion of glucagon. Hope you enjoyed this session. Hope the session will help you to understand everything about our chapter about glycemia. Thank you guys. Bye bye.